When analyzing spatial data, it's essential to remember that correlation does not imply causation. Patterns on a map reflect systems, not the inherent traits of a community. In places shaped by redlining or engineered segregation, maps showing higher crime or fewer neighborhood resources does not mean that residents there are inherently more prone to crime or poor outcomes. These patterns point instead to structural conditions like disinvestment, segregation, and systemic barriers that concentrate disadvantage. For example, decades of over-policing in historically redlined areas can inflate arrest numbers, creating a feedback loop where the data appears to confirm a negative bias about community behavior, but it actually reflects unequal enforcement. A map might also show higher emergency call rates in the same neighborhoods, but this too requires careful interpretation. High call volumes often reflect the absence of stable housing, healthcare, and safety infrastructure, rather than an increase in criminal activity. Because when policing becomes the default response to medical or social crises, call data can falsely signal that a community has higher crime when in fact it has higher unmet needs. Poor emergency response times in these areas due to fewer fire stations, understaffed EMS services, or deteriorating roads further illustrate how structural neglect shapes both the data we see and the lived realities they represent. These issues are not caused by community, but by long-term policy decisions and disinvestment. Scale and ecological fallacy further complicate interpretation. Data aggregated at the level of census tracts, neighborhoods, or tribal lands can obscure key differences and lead to harmful overgeneralization. A map might show higher emergency call rates in a predominantly Latino or immigrant neighborhood, but that does not mean every household experiences those same needs for emergency support. What often lies beneath are policy-driven conditions, discriminatory lending, limited housing options, and language barriers that shape vulnerability. In Native communities, similar legacies appear through chronic underinvestment in infrastructure and limits on land sovereignty. These patterns are not cultural deficiencies. They are the geographic footprints of unequal policy decisions. Thus, ethical spatial analysis requires moving beyond pattern recognition to understand context and power structures. Analysts must question how data were created, who benefits from their use, and what histories or policies continue to shape what we see on the map. The goal is not just to describe inequity, but to expose the systems that produce it and ensure interpretation does not reproduce harm. Scale matters because the size and boundaries of the area being analyzed can exaggerate or obscure patterns, and relying solely on aggregated data can lead to misleading or biased interpretations. In GIS, being mindful of scale and avoiding the ecological fallacy is essential for ethical analysis, especially when studying sensitive social issues that intersect with place, race, inequity, and legacies of policies like redlining.